Wonder if I can share this live.
You could if you want to.
Yeah, let me go mobile and see because I could see when you're live and then I could share it.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. We have the Dan Sfera, who I have decided he needs a new tagline. We're gonna call him the bad boy of clinical research. As you can tell, he has the fancy headphones. He has the fancy black background, which makes him look dangerous. Um, but who do you trust in times when you can't trust the government? You trust the
That's
bad boy
right.
of Clinton.
I like that, Darshan. That might be the new tagline. I like that. I do think that that would work, interestingly enough.
There you go. So Dan, we talked about just having you on, and I pointed out to you that you just announcing that we're going to have you has had a lot of people get really excited about the opportunity to listen to you live, to potentially ask questions. So, so Dan, before we start, tell us about yourself.
Yeah,
For
my
those of
name is Dan Sfera. I've been in the research space since 2005, mostly as a site owner. But I've done coordinating, I've done site directing, I still do monitoring. Um, have a small CRO. We only have 3 protocols right now, 2 of which are virtual trials, and the third one actually became a remote monitoring. And what else? Started a YouTube channel back in 2010. So 5 years into my career, decided to do YouTube because I couldn't find anything, man. I couldn't find anything online how to help me do my job better that I didn't have to pay for. So that always stuck in the back of my mind. And when I had some free time, decided the channel. And initially, I thought I was going to get patients from it, but only researchers were watching, and so pivoted and yeah, been doing it ever since. CRA Academy too, CRA CRC Academy. Those have been really interesting businesses, especially in the time of COVID and quarantining.
so you talked about all of these businesses and you talk about CRA, CRC Academy. Here's my question. We've now come to that point where everyone's talking about um, what does the world look like post COVID? And we've all heard the many conversations around what does a post COVID world look like. Well, let's not sort of get into the generality of it. Let's talk about the more specific discussions, and the more specific ones that everyone's talking about are what de- everyone's talking about decentralized trials. Everyone's talking about remote monitoring. What is your take? You said you have a couple of studies. How is it different from
Yeah.
what you always did?
It depends who you ask. So if you're on the site side of things, they don't like this stuff. They want the patients to come in. They sites would prefer a hybrid. So if the patient doesn't feel like coming in, we can do it through the telephone or through Zoom. But we still prefer to have monitors come into the office for the most part, patients to come into the office. Sites are anti pure virtual trial because obviously it's a threat. Virtual trial is a threat to the sites to some extent because you don't need as many sites. But then the question is, well, how are you going to get the patients? So pharma loves the idea of decentralized virtual trial because it streamlines everything, makes everything fit into little neat compartments. But when you're doing a clinical trial, nothing is neat, and it starts from the patients. Um, the criterias are getting more rigid. That tells me we're going to need more sites, not less, and that tells me we're going to need more specialization as far as clinicians in the industry. So my company, DSC, is we've been focusing on helping research naive doctors, either partnering with them or getting them on a subscription model to where we help them set up their own research clinics. And that's been helpful for diversity of patients, right? Which is like a new thing that everyone, it shouldn't be new, but it's a new thing that that pharma has been pushing, how to get more minorities enrolled in research. And it starts by getting the clinicians to treat them interested in research. So virtual trials, to me, it's always a dichotomy of what pharma wants versus what sites want and what is actually practical. Like somewhere in between, we're gonna have what we call a hybrid model. But I think in the immediate short-term future, we go back to traditional sites the way it was before.
I want to understand what you meant by that last bit. You said in the immediate we go back to what where we were before.
Right.
Um, are you saying that that's what's most likely to happen? What you think
Yeah.
should happen?
No, I think that's what's most likely to happen. Um, Even now, I'm noticing CRAs. So when they come to my sites, they prefer to come in person. Um,
Right.
Obviously, with COVID, nobody wants to put their employees at risk. But
Right.
once enough people are vaccinated, I think monitors come back to sites. Maybe not as frequently, but they come back, and patients come to the office, and it's kind of like how it was before, but now we have additional tools with hybrid visits, so remote monitoring visits, and if the patients don't feel like coming in for whatever reason, remote patient visits. Uh, but I don't think we're going just virtual overnight. I think that's going to happen maybe towards the end of the decade. But the question that needs to be answered is how are we going to get more patients in the study? And because we're going to need more patients in these studies. So I don't think virtual trials answers that question of how do we get more patients in the studies, because what we're seeing right now in 2021 is a continuation of 2020. More studies because of COVID. There's like 20% increase in trials, and so the resources are being stretched thin from coordinators to PIs to CRAs and to patients. I mean, so virtuals does not answer that question to me of how do we get more patients in these studies, and that's really what I think. Why I think we're gonna go back to sort of how things were before, but a little differently.
So, here's my question. You're talking about a situation where we go back, but I don't know if you saw it yesterday or today's news, but Amazon came out and said that they're going to go into telehealth. And
Yeah,
everyone's telehealth companies are going through the roof, where their valuations are going through the roof. I mean, not like Bitcoin or anything, but just sort of they've been valued highly. The
yeah.
question I have is why bother? Why do I need a site if I can connect to my maybe it's still a site, but the site says I'll keep my records here, but I'm going to talk to all of my patients all over the county or
Right.
all over the state using this doctor. So you have fewer sites doing specialized work. But what's your take on that?
So that's the theory of how it should play out. I think what Amazon's doing, I think they're making tools, and these tools are going to be easier, just like we're live streaming now. You just push a button, and I don't know, hundreds of thousands get to watch. I don't know how many are watching, but I think these are tools. But I think the fundamental question is, where do you get the trust from these patients to even consider a clinical trial? And if you don't have the
Ah,
sites doing that, these tools are just tools, but where are these patients going to come from? I mean, the patients come from the doctors who treat them. And which doctor, if they're not the PI, is going to refer their patient to a competitor a few miles away? Oh, for a study. Okay.
what if
But we promise we'll send the patient back to you.
right? But here's a question. Maybe they don't have to send the patient. And that's a really interesting angle that I hadn't even considered. So thank you.
Yeah, pharma
But
doesn't
maybe
consider that.
but what first of all, I just realized what your black background looks like as you were talking. I was like, you can be your patient could be anywhere, or you could literally look like you're in a cave in Afghanistan. So that
That's
was
right.
the
That's right. I gotta keep the beard going too.
but ignoring that part of it. No, but That's an interesting angle. So, what if the physician said, "You know what? They'll still remain my patients. I will still do the studies. I just don't need the patients to come in every single time."
Yeah,
And I
that's
guess
where I
that
think
that
it's
speaks to
headed.
how
That is
diverse.
where it's headed. I agree with you. I agree with you. And that's where the technology is just a tool. It's not a paradigm changing technology. It's just a tool that makes it easier, but it doesn't mean we're going to be able to use less sites, which is what pharma really wants. I don't think that's
But
happening. I mean, how are we going to get these patients in the studies?
so here, let me reframe that question though. What if you start, instead of going to sites? What if the CRO starts reaching out to patient organizations and build that relationship that way?
That's one way they could go about it. But at the end of the day, the patients trust their doctors primarily with these kind of decisions.
Yeah.
And we've seen time and time again, I mean, at least with the sites in my own network, the sites that do best have physicians that participate in the research, either as PIs or as sub-Is. And they're able to get their patients in. And these patient organizations, maybe they're good for community support, but at the end of the day, the patient gets sick, they're going to go see their doctor.
So that's fascinating. So here's my question. Do you, one of the things I know, for example, just knowing you for a few years at this point,
Oh, a
you
decade.
you're a decade. Yeah, we're both getting old, man. Uh, but the part I think about is, in fact I was actually, sorry, my ADD is kicking in here, but I was looking at a picture of you to promote this, and I found a picture of you from, I'm gonna guess, 2010 in a suit and stuff, and I was like, no, not him anymore.
That
Um,
is not me. My
but
wife
okay,
convinced me to get dressed that way and the food.
good for her. Uh, but okay, so here's my question. You're, one of the things you're doing right now is Latinos in research,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's, first of all, do you want to tell us more about that?
Yeah, I mean that's great. So we're pushing that. We created that in December, and I got a shout out to Black women in clinical research for the idea. We had Danielle Coe, the founder of Black Women in Clinical Research. I interviewed her, and she explained her organization, which she just started a few months prior. And I thought that was such an amazing idea. I said, "Would you mind if we did this for Latinos in clinical research?" And she said, "Yeah, go for it." So basically, the goal is to raise awareness amongst minority communities. So in our case, it's Latinos. All ethnicities welcome, but Latinos, like our group is about Latino issues. And it starts with the researchers, right? It starts with the Latino researchers or anyone else really from the industry who's interested in networking. How do we help each other out? How do we network? How do we let each other know about new opportunities? And how do we let your colleagues who may be in other industries, right? Or your friends, how do we let your friends know about research? Because research is short staffed. I mean, we need more coordinators, we need more CRAs, we need more PIs, we need more everything in research, we need more patients in research. So the idea is to get more Latinos working in the industry or being successful in the industry, and then they can be evangelists to the communities, a very grassroots approach, right? Go out in the communities, tell another Latino what research is, and they tend to trust people with the same ethnicity. So that's the at least that's my um, overview of what we're doing. But there's three other co-founders. I think their answers would rhyme, maybe not exactly, but they would be saying similar things.
So here's my question: does remote or virtual clinical trials, remote monitoring, decentralized clinical trials, does that promote the opportunity to bring in more diverse people?
Yes, in theory it does, but at the end of the day, it boils down to the clinicians, right? Who's treating these patients. Um, and that's another thing we're trying to do, trying to go into these communities where the clinicians are treating these patients and get them interested in clinical research. We're signing a what do they call it? A work order right now with a big pharma this week. Hopefully this week. We've been working on it for like 3 months. How to improve minority participation in their studies. And the FDA has come out and told them, hey, we're not accepting your data unless we have 25% African American, 10% Hispanic. I don't know the exact numbers, but that's what, and I see Christine here. Christine's a Latinos in clinical research group too. But does decentralized trials help that? In theory, yes, because the technology makes it easier and makes trials more accessible to people. But in reality, what we need is more sites and to integrate these tools into it. So pharma has it half right. The part that they don't like is that they're going to need more sites, not less. That's the secret, guys. Your technology is great, but guess what? You're going to need more sites, not less. In my opinion.
So maybe the problem isn't more sites or less sites. It's patient centricity and making it easier for patients. But here's the question: does it drop the costs of clinical research if
no,
if you have fewer sites? You don't think so?
The way I'm suggesting, no, because you need more sites. You need to educate these clinicians who are focused on these minority populations in the underserved communities. I mean, these guys, like, we go to these places, they're here and all across Southern California, across the Southwest. You know, it's like 90% Hispanic patients. These clinicians are drastically overworked, and to even approach them with the idea of research is like so alien to them. You need to invest time into that and resources into that, into cultivating that kind of relationship. And then you could plug in the technology and make it more accessible for those patients. I mean, why drive 20 miles to see your doctor when you can do it through? I agree with that. But how do you convince that patient in the first place to do a study? And that conversation is usually one-on-one between the patient and their clinician. And these clinicians are not going to be referring their patients to anybody else.
So what do you think? I mean, I'm sort of going to go between two different topics, but I find this really interesting. You talked about the value of Latinos in research, and people trust people in engaging with those
with similar backgrounds
themselves. So my question is, what are the big mistakes you think that pharma companies are making? Obviously, you don't have to give away all your secrets because that's what you get hired for. But
they're not making. Their biggest mistake is they're overly dependent on new technologies to solve like one-on-one human problems, right? They're trying to scale. They're trying to do this at scale, and they're trying to use the same principles that it would take to scale a business into patient recruitment, when most of these patients, African American, for sure, Hispanic Americans, are not very trusting of big pharma, but they are trusting of their clinicians, right? For the most part in the community. So I think the over reliance on technology and the underutilization of human resources in a grassroots context is the biggest problem. And I think they know this. I just think they'd rather spend the money, and they are starting to spend the money on these grassroots efforts. I mean, I'm getting 3 projects from the same sponsor, but 3 different ones in the first quarter of 2021. So they realize this, and guess what? We're working with a really big CRO on it. Like, we're in the background. Grassroots. Very cool. In the background is. Have you?
Could you repeat that?
No, nothing. I was going to go off on a tangent. I'm reading Christine's comment. This in the house. I love it, Christine. Where in Texas?
Where in Texas are you, Christine?
This is getting a massive influx of new residents.
Yeah, Texas is, isn't it? So here's another question. Do you see as one of the big things that since Christine came on, she mentioned Texas. Um, we're seeing a lot of companies, especially tech companies, say, you know what, I don't want to deal. Oh, by the way, she's in San Antonio.
Love it.
We're seeing a lot of companies that are saying, you know what, I don't need to be in California. I don't want to pay the taxes. Do you see a role for virtual studies where now you suddenly go, I don't need to be sitting in Texas. I can sit in California and do the research in Texas, or vice versa. I can sit in Texas and do the research in California, therefore saving on a bunch of taxes.
Not only do I see that, I'm doing it. In May. I'm moving. I don't even know if you know this. I'm moving to Arizona in May.
I did not know that.
Wife, yeah. So, but I'm keeping my businesses here, right? I have 2 businesses I need to keep here, but I can manage them virtually. I'm not really much managing anymore, anyways. But we still have people here on the ground. But I'm going to open a site in rural Arizona, Yuma, Arizona, starting in May. Like 80% Hispanic over there too. So yes, I do think that's happening. But I do think you're also going to need study coordinators on the ground. I mean, that's not changing. That's not going to change. Patients, they may not want to come into the office every visit, but they are wanting to come in occasionally. And guess what? I was just in a study, Darshan. Okay. Here's the thing. I think another thing pharma doesn't understand. Patients are actually more compliant. It's counterintuitive, but patients are more compliant when they know they have to come in person and face somebody in person. So let me text you. So I was just in a clinical trial for COVID. I had COVID. Thankfully, I had mild symptoms. Dr. Sabine Hazen put me in one of her studies as a compassionate use, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin. I got to witness firsthand the power of medicine. An hour of taking those pills felt better. The next week, I recovered. I was in a virtual trial, so that means I had to do diaries, patient diaries, every day. I had to take my pulse oximeter, my O2 levels every day. I had to sleep and wear 24 hours this ECG machine. And I was probably her worst patient ever, like as far as compliance. And I understand the compliance aspect, right?
Yeah.
And it's because I didn't have to go and face her coordinator when he asked me, like, hey, did you do your diary? It's a little harder for me in person to say, no, I didn't do it. So it's more motivating for me to do it. But I know it's just going to text me and I'm going to say, oh, all right, no, better next time. So I think there's like compliance, a little bit of compliance is lost. But I do think there are some, on the other side as far as saving costs and patient centricity and all that stuff. But it's not all like all or nothing. It's not binary.
I love it. Dan, last words. How can people reach out to you if they have questions, if they want to find you, if they want to engage you?
LinkedIn is really good. Dan Sfera. You can email me, dan@theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Or if you want immediate help, just text me 949-415-6256. And we'll see what we can do.
Dan, any last words before calling it?
No, I love this, Darshan. I think in 2021 LinkedIn for our history, and I think it's really smart that you're doing these live series. I think it's brings extra layer of fun to the interviews.
Well, I'm glad we're having fun. That's the whole point. Thanks again, Dan, for coming on. We're going to have you on again soon, hopefully.
Sounds good, Darshan. Thank you very